I wasn't seeking revenge. I just reminded them of, hey, the truth hurts.
The champagne flute shattered against the hardwood floor, like my marriage, suddenly, violently, and with everyone watching. But that came later. First, let me tell you about the moment I realized my wife was carrying my boss's baby, and how I decided to burn down their perfect little world with nothing but the truth and a smile. My name is Daniel Wilcox, and I'm what you might call an expert in structural engineering. Not the kind that builds bridges, the kind that tears them down. Tonight, at my wife's family reunion, I was about to demonstrate my specialty. "Danny!" my wife Samantha called from across her mother's living room, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved for public performances. "Come here, honey. I have something wonderful to share with everyone." The gathered crowd of relatives and friends turned toward me like wonderful 58 1907. The gathered crowd of this things like this different suggestion to America. Third weather is this good way that she did snow and far about it. When I probably talk about my wife's, I for so far with demonstrator. My wife is a magic that support me. I have something way with me. I still hear intelligent. I have certainly wonderful. The guidance in classes, I enablage and lessons. The gathered crowd of relatives toward me like vultures sensing carrion. Samantha stood next to the fireplace, one manicured hand resting on her still flat stomach, the other clutching a champagne flute she hadn't touched all evening. Smart woman, can't drink when you're growing someone else's mistake. I'd known about the pregnancy for 3 weeks. What I'd discovered yesterday was far more interesting. The father wasn't me. A little detective work through her phone records, credit card statements, and that telltale glow she got whenever Richard Crane's name appeared on her screen had painted a very clear picture. My boss and my wife had been painting their own picture for the past 6 months, and apparently they'd created a masterpiece. "Danny works so hard," Samantha continued, her sister Lisa nodding approvingly from the couch. "He deserves some good news for once." Lisa, 34 years old, recently divorced, and blessed with the kind of sharp tongue that could cut glass. She'd never liked me, mainly because I'd never fallen for her attempts at seduction during family gatherings. What she didn't know was that her 19-year-old daughter Zoe had been far more successful in that department. College girls, it turns out, appreciate a man who listens to them and doesn't treat them like accessories. "We're pregnant," Samantha announced, raising her untouched champagne. "Isn't that wonderful?" The room erupted in congratulations. Her mother, Ruth, a woman who'd perfected the art of passive-aggressive commentary over 7 decades, actually smiled. Her best friend Marcy squealed like a teenager. Even Mike, my one remaining ally in this social minefield, managed a weak grin from his position by the kitchen door. "Congratulations, Sam," I said, walking slowly across the room. Every eye followed me, waiting for the expected reaction. Tears of joy, maybe, or overwhelmed stammering. Instead, I picked up an unopened bottle of champagne from the side table and began working the cork loose. "This calls for a proper toast." "Oh, Danny," Samantha beamed, clearly relieved I was playing along with her charade. "You're so sweet." The cork popped with a satisfying sound, and I poured myself a generous glass. The room fell silent, everyone waiting for my heartfelt speech about impending fatherhood and blessed events. "To Samantha," I began, raising my glass high, "and to Richard Crane, my boss, who's been working so closely with my wife these past 6 months. Really hands-on management style, if you know what I mean." Samantha's face went white. Lisa's mouth fell open. Ruth's smile disappeared so fast it might have been a magic trick. "Danny, what are you—" Samantha started. "I'm not finished," I interrupted, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. "You see, folks, Sam here is pregnant, just like she said. What she forgot to mention is that the father is Richard, not me. Surprise!" Silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Then Lisa, bless her vindictive heart, decided to make things worse. "You pathetic loser," she hissed, standing up from the couch. "We all knew something was wrong with you. Sam deserves better than a bitter, paranoid husband who can't even... Speaking of surprises, I interrupted again, turning to face Lisa with my most pleasant smile. Your daughter Zoe is also pregnant. Congratulations, Grandma. The father? Well, that would be me. Lisa's champagne glass hit the floor first, followed immediately by Ruth's shocked gasp and Marcy's horrified shriek. Samantha looked like she'd been slapped, and Mike, good old Mike, started laughing so hard he had to lean against the doorframe for support. You're lying, Lisa whispered, but her face told a different story. Mothers know these things, even when they don't want to. Am I? I pulled out my phone and showed the room a photo. Zoe and me at dinner last week, her hand clearly displaying a small but noticeable bump beneath her sweater. She's about 4 months along. We've been seeing each other since last Christmas. Turns out she appreciates a man who doesn't treat her like a child. Ruth started shouting about family values. Marcy began calling me every name in the book. Lisa lunged toward me, but Mike caught her arm and gently but firmly pushed her back onto the couch. Through it all, Samantha stood frozen by the fireplace. Her perfect announcement turned into a nightmare. This was the moment I'd been planning for weeks. The complete destruction of her carefully constructed lie, witnessed by everyone who mattered in her social circle. You sick bastard, Lisa screamed. She's 19, you're almost 40. She's an adult who makes her own choices, I replied calmly. Unlike some people in this room, I don't manipulate people into doing what I want. I just treat them with respect. That's when someone called the police. The flashing red and blue lights outside Ruth's house painted the neighborhood in alternating shades of chaos and embarrassment. Officer Martinez, a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd probably seen every kind of domestic dispute imaginable, stood in the living room taking statements while his partner, a younger woman named Officer Chen, tried to sort out the competing versions of events. So let me get this straight, Martinez said, consulting his notepad. Mr. Wilcox announced his wife's pregnancy, then announced his own affair with her niece. And this caused a disturbance? Predator! Lisa shrieked from the couch where Mike was still keeping her from launching herself at me. He seduced my teenage daughter. Ma'am, your daughter is 19, Officer Chen pointed out patiently. That makes her an adult under the law. It's sick. It's wrong. He's married to my sister. Soon-to-be ex-sister, I corrected, pulling a manila envelope from my jacket pocket. Samantha, these are for you. I handed her the divorce papers I'd had prepared 3 days ago. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope and saw her name at the top of the legal documents. You can't be serious, she whispered. Deadly serious. You'll find everything's very straightforward. No-fault divorce, equal division of assets. And since the baby isn't mine, no child support issues to complicate things. Officer Martinez looked up from his notepad. Is there any immediate threat here? Any violence or intimidation? Just hurt feelings and wounded pride, I said. I think we're done here. When Zoe walked through the front door. She'd been at work, a part-time job at the local bookstore that helped pay for her college classes. At 19, she had the kind of natural beauty that didn't need makeup or designer clothes, though the small bump beneath her loose-fitting dress was becoming harder to hide. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked confused by the police cars in the driveway. What's going on? She asked, then saw me standing in the middle of the chaos. Danny? What are you doing here? Hey, beautiful, I said, walking over to take her hand. I told them about us, about the baby. Her eyes widened. Then she looked her. Her mother's rage, her aunt's betrayal, her grandmother's disgust. But instead of shrinking back or apologizing, Zoe straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Good, she said firmly. I'm tired of hiding. Zoe, honey, Lisa started, her voice switching to that manipulative tone mothers use when they want to control their children. You don't understand what this man has done to you. He's taken advantage. He's the first man who's ever treated me like I have a brain, Zoe interrupted. The first one who listens when I talk instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. The first one who doesn't think I'm just a pretty face with nothing to offer. He's using you. No, Mom. You're the one who uses people. You used Dad until he got tired of it and left. You use Grandma Ruth for money and free babysitting when you need it. You even tried to use me to get back at Aunt Sam when you were jealous of her job. Ruth gasped. Zoe! It's true, Grandma. Mom's been bitter about Aunt Sam's success for years. She's always talking about how unfair it is that Sam got the good job and the nice house, while she got stuck with a deadbeat husband and a teenage daughter. The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of uncomfortable truths being spoken aloud. Officer Martinez cleared his throat. Unless someone wants to press charges for a specific crime, I think we're done here, he said. This appears to be a family matter that should be handled through lawyers and counselors, not police officers. Thank you, officer, I said, then turned to Zoe. Ready to go? She nodded, then walked over to kiss her grandmother's cheek. I love you, Grandma Ruth, but I love him too, and I'm not going to apologize for that. We were almost to the door when Samantha found her voice. Danny, wait. I turned back to face my soon-to-be ex-wife. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the evening's revelations. The confident, manipulative woman who'd been playing games behind my back for months had been replaced by someone who finally understood that actions have consequences. This doesn't have to be so ugly, she said quietly. We can work something out. Talk about this like adults. We're past talking, Sam. You made your choice 6 months ago, when you decided Richard Crane was a better option than your husband. I'm just making sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. You're destroying my life. No, I'm revealing your life. There's a difference. All squeezed Zoe's hand, and we walked out into the cool evening air. Behind us, the shouting started again, but it felt distant now, like noise from a television in another room. Mike followed us outside, shaking his head and grinning. Jesus, Danny, he said. That was either the most brilliant thing I've ever seen or the most insane. I can't decide which. Why not both? I replied. Want to grab a beer? I think we have some things to celebrate. As we walked toward my car, I could see neighbors peering out their windows at the police cars and the drama unfolding in Ruth's living room. By tomorrow morning, everyone in the neighborhood would know the story. By tomorrow afternoon, it would be all over Samantha's workplace. By the end of the week, Richard Crane would be dealing with whispers and pointed questions from his own employees. Sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth at the right time, in the right place, with the right audience. Tonight had been perfect. But as we drove away from the chaos, I caught sight of Richard's black Mercedes parked 2 blocks away, and I realized the evening's entertainment was far from over. The next morning brought 3 things: a headache from celebrating too hard with Mike, 17 missed calls from various family members, and a termination letter slipped under my apartment door sometime before dawn. I had moved into the furnished 1-bedroom place 3 weeks ago, right after I'd confirmed Samantha's affair, but before I'd decided to go nuclear at the family gathering. The apartment was nothing special. Basic furniture, thin walls, and a view of the parking lot, but it was mine. And more importantly, it wasn't contaminated by memories of my cheating wife. The termination letter was printed on Richard Crane's company letterhead and signed with his characteristic aggressive scrawl. Effective immediately, it read, due to conduct unbecoming of a company representative and violation of workplace harassment policies. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a butter knife. Zoe was still asleep in my bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. She'd stayed the night, partly because she didn't want to face her mother's inevitable confrontation, and partly because we'd both needed the comfort of not being alone. Pregnancy suited her. There was a glow about her that made her even more beautiful, if that was possible. My phone rang. Mike's name appeared on the screen. You see the news yet? He asked without preamble. What news? Seven's morning show. They're doing a story about workplace harassment and inappropriate relationships. Guess whose names got mentioned? I walked to the living room and turned on the television, keeping the volume low so I wouldn't wake Zoe. The local news anchor, a perfectly coiffed woman named Jennifer Walsh, was discussing A disturbing trend of powerful men taking advantage of their positions to exploit vulnerable women. Seriousness sources tell us that Richard Crane, CEO of Crane Construction, has been involved in an inappropriate relationship with a married employee's wife, leading to pregnancy and the breakdown of the employee's marriage. This comes on the heels of recent allegations that the same employee has been engaging in a relationship with a teenage family member. "Seth's son of a witch," I muttered. "Gets better," Mike said. "Keep watching." The story continued with a brief interview with Dr. Patricia Williams, a local psychologist who specialized in workplace harassment cases. She spoke in general terms about power dynamics and the psychological damage caused by infidelity. But the implication was clear. I was being painted as both victim and perpetrator, while Richard was being portrayed as a powerful man who'd crossed ethical boundaries. "The most disturbing aspect of this case," Dr. Williams said, "is how these situations often create a cycle of inappropriate behavior. When someone's trust is violated in such a fundamental way, they may act out in ways that are harmful to others, particularly those who are younger or more vulnerable." "They're making me sound like a predator," I told Mike. "Yeah, well, that's what happens when you mess with rich guys. They have better PR people than you do." The news story concluded with a statement from Richard's company, expressing their commitment to maintaining appropriate workplace boundaries and their zero tolerance for harassment of any kind. No mention of the fact that the CEO had been screwing his employee's wife for 6 months. I was about to turn off the television when my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Wilcox, this is Janet Morrison from Channel 7. I was wondering if you'd be available for an interview this afternoon. We'd like to get your side of the story." "My side of what story?" "The allegations that have been made against you regarding your relationship with a 19-year-old family member. We want to be fair and balanced in our reporting." "Fair and balanced? Right. I don't think so, Ms. Morrison, but thanks for the offer." "Mr. Wilcox, these are serious allegations. Don't you want the opportunity to defend yourself? The only allegation is that I'm in a relationship with a consenting adult. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, Tom Bradley, who I'd retained when I started planning my divorce. Tom was a former prosecutor who'd gone into private practice, specializing in family law and employment disputes. He was also one of the few people I knew who was meaner than Richard Crane when he needed to be. "Danny, I was just about to call you," Tom said. "We need to talk. Can you be in my office in an hour?" "That bad?" "Let's just say Richard Crane has been busy since last night. Bring Zoe if she's willing to come. We're going to need her statement." An hour later, Zoe and I sat in Tom's downtown office while he explained exactly how screwed we were, legally speaking. "The termination letter is probably legal," he said, spreading documents across his desk. "Richard's claiming you violated company policy by creating a hostile work environment. The fact that you announced your affair at a family gathering where other employees might hear about it gives him cover." "What other employees?" I asked. "Marcy Henderson works in your company's accounting department. She was at the party last night." Affirmed about that connection. Marcy, Samantha's gossipy best friend, processed invoices for Richard's construction company. She'd witnessed the entire meltdown and would undoubtedly be happy to testify that my behavior had created workplace drama. "What about the wrongful termination angle?" Zoe asked. "Isn't there something illegal about firing someone because your boss is sleeping with his wife?" Tom smiled. "Smart girl. Yes, there might be something there, but it's complicated. Richard's lawyers are claiming the termination is based on Danny's conduct, not the affair. They're saying he created a hostile work environment by publicly humiliating his wife and announcing his relationship with you." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We fight back. But first, we need to control the narrative. The news story this morning was just the beginning. Richard's going to try to destroy your reputation before you can damage his. We need to get ahead of that." Tom pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "Here's what I need from both of you. Danny, I want a complete timeline of Samantha's affair. Dates, places, evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that proves the relationship existed before you started seeing Zoe. Zoe, I need you to be prepared to make a statement about the nature of your relationship with Danny. When it started, how it developed, whether there was any coercion or inappropriate behavior. There wasn't, Zoe said firmly. He never even kissed me until after I made the first move. I practically had to throw myself at him. Good. We'll need that in writing. I also want both of you to avoid talking to reporters. Let me handle all media contact from now on. As we left Tom's office, I felt like we were preparing for war rather than a legal proceeding. Richard Crane had money, influence, and a team of lawyers who specialized in making problems disappear. All I had was the truth and a 19-year-old pregnant girlfriend who was braver than most people twice her age. But sometimes, I reflected as we walked to my car, the truth is the most powerful tool you can have. 3 days later, I was having lunch at Murphy's Tavern when my former friends decided to stage an intervention. Murphy's was the kind of place where construction workers and office employees mixed freely, united by their need for cheap beer and honest food. I'd been eating there twice a week for 5 years, long enough to have my own unofficial table near the back, where I could watch the door and avoid unwanted company. That afternoon, unwanted company found me anyway. They came in together: Steve Martinez from the engineering department, Paul Wilson from project management, and Dave Chen from accounting. All guys I'd worked with for years, shared beers with after difficult projects, invited to backyard barbecues and birthday parties. All guys who'd apparently decided I was now persona non grata. Danny, Steve said, sliding into the booth across from me without being invited. We need to talk. Paul and Dave flanked him, creating a wall of disapproving faces. The other customers in Murphy's pretended not to notice, but I could feel their attention like heat from a fire. About what? I asked, continuing to eat my burger as if nothing unusual was happening. About what you did to Sam, Paul said. About this sick thing with that girl. Her name is Zoe, and she's not that girl. She's a woman who makes her own decisions. She's 19, Dave practically shouted, then lowered his voice when other diners turned to look. Jesus, Danny, what's wrong with you? I wrestlingly set down my burger and looked at each of them in turn. These were men I'd respected, men whose opinions had mattered to me. Now, they sat across from me like a tribunal, ready to pass judgment on my life based on gossip and assumptions. Let me ask you something, I said calmly. How long have you known about Sam and Richard? The three men exchanged glances. Steve shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We don't know what you're talking about, Paul said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Because Marcy Henderson has been working in your department for 2 years, Dave. She's Sam's best friend and the biggest gossip in the company. You're telling me she never mentioned that my wife was spending a lot of time with the boss? That's different. How is it different? Because Sam's not some teenager you picked up at a college party. You're right. She's a grown woman who chose to cheat on her husband with his boss. Zoe's a grown woman who chose to be with someone who treats her with respect. Which one of those sounds worse to you? Steve leaned forward. Danny, come on. You know this isn't right. That girl is young enough to be your daughter. If I'd had a kid when I was 20, sure. But I didn't. And she's not my daughter. She's my girlfriend. And soon she'll be the mother of my child. A child I actually want, unlike the one my wife is carrying for another man. The conversation was drawing more attention now. Murphy's wasn't a large place, and voices carry in a room full of people trying to mind their own business. I could see the bartender, a heavy-set man named Frank, watching us with the expression of someone deciding whether to intervene. Look, Paul said, trying a different approach. We get it. Sam hurt you. But taking up with her teenage niece isn't the answer. It's just going to make everything worse. Worse for who? Me? Sam? Richard? Or worse for you guys who have to work with Richard every day and pretend you don't know he's been screwing around with married employees? That hit home. All three men worked directly or indirectly for Richard Crane, and all three had families to support. Speaking out against the boss wasn't just uncomfortable, it was potentially career-ending. This isn't about Richard, Steve said weakly. Everything's about Richard. He's the one with the power in this situation. He's the one who chose to have an affair with a married woman. He's the one who got her pregnant and then let her announce it to her family like it was her husband's child. But somehow, I'm the villain because I fell in love with someone younger than me. "You're married!" Dave exploded. "Not for long. I filed for divorce yesterday. Sam can have Richard and his money and his promises. I'll take Zoe and our baby and a clear conscience." Frank the bartender appeared at our table, a bar towel in his hands and a diplomatic expression on his face. "Gentlemen, you're disturbing my other customers. If you want to continue this conversation, I'd suggest you take it outside." The four of us looked around the room. Every eye was on us, some sympathetic, some judgmental, all curious. This was exactly the kind of public spectacle that would be all over town by dinner time. "We're done here," I said, standing up and throwing a 20 on the table. "Thanks for lunch, Frank. Sorry for the disruption." As I walked toward the door, Steve called after me. "Danny, wait!" I turned back. He was standing now, his face conflicted. "We've been friends for 5 years," he said. "Doesn't that count for something?" It did, until you decided to believe gossip and assumptions instead of asking me what actually happened. Until you decided that my cheating wife deserves more loyalty than I do. It's not about loyalty. It's exactly about loyalty. Richard Crane signs your paychecks, so you're taking his side. I understand that. I even respect it in a way. But don't pretend this is about morality or concern for my well-being. This is about you guys protecting your jobs and your comfortable relationships with the boss. Stood up too. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been one of you giving me a heads up when you knew my wife was cheating. Fair would have been supporting me when I found out, instead of judging me for how I chose to handle it. Fair would have been recognizing that Richard Crane is the one who violated workplace policies, not me." I looked at each of them one more time. "But you're right about one thing. We have been friends for 5 years. That's why this hurts so much." Walked out of Murphy's Tavern, knowing I'd never go back. Another piece of my old life, gone. But as I got in my car and drove away, I realized I felt lighter rather than sadder. Sometimes you don't know how much weight you're carrying until you finally put it down. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How did lunch go?" I typed back. "Better than expected. I'll tell you when I get home." A one-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a view of the parking lot. But Zoe would be there, probably reading one of her college textbooks while rubbing her growing belly. She'd look up when I walked in, smile that made everything else fade into background noise, and ask me about my day like it actually mattered to her. Maybe home wasn't about the place after all. 2 weeks later, I was ready to end this war on my terms. The plan had come together slowly, piece by piece, like a construction project where each phase had to be completed before the next one could begin. Tom Bradley had provided the legal framework. Mike had supplied the technical expertise, and Zoe had contributed something I hadn't expected, a devious streak that rivaled her mother's. "You realize this could backfire spectacularly," Tom warned as we sat in his office reviewing the final details. "If any part of this goes wrong, you could face criminal charges." "What we're doing is completely legal," I replied. "Embarrassing? Yes. Potentially career-ending for Richard, absolutely. But legal." The key had been discovering Richard's weakness, his ego. The man couldn't resist being the center of attention, especially when that attention came with admiration and respect. His monthly leadership breakfast at the Hilton downtown was legendary in business circles. A chance for Richard to hold court with other executives, share war stories, and bask in the glow of his own success. This month's breakfast was special. Richard was being honored by the Chamber of Commerce for his company's charitable contributions to local schools. The irony wasn't lost on me. A man who'd been sleeping with his employee's wife was being celebrated for his commitment to family values and community support. The plan was elegantly simple. Mike, who'd worked as an audiovisual technician before joining the construction industry, had helped me prepare a special presentation for Richard's big moment. All it required was access to the hotel's projection system and a few minutes of distraction. Zoe had provided the distraction by getting a job as a server for the hotel's catering company. At 19, she looked even younger in the black uniform and white apron, which made her perfect for the role. Nobody pays attention to the help, especially young female help who smile and keep the coffee cups full. The morning of the breakfast, I sat in my car across the street from the Hilton, watching the parade of expensive suits and luxury cars arrive for Richard's moment of glory. My phone buzzed with updates from Zoe, who was inside setting up the dining room. "Audio system check complete," she texted. "Mike's equipment is connected and ready. R just arrived. He's wearing the blue suit and that smug expression you hate." I smiled. Zoe had developed an intense dislike for Richard Crane, partly because of what he'd done to our marriage, but mostly because of how he'd tried to destroy my reputation afterward. She'd watched the news stories, read the social media comments, and seen how his money and influence had turned me into a pariah in my own community. "Remember," I texted back, "wait for my signal. Everything has to be perfectly timed." The breakfast was scheduled to begin at 8 o'clock, with Richard's presentation at 8:30. I waited until 8:25, then walked into the hotel lobby like I belonged there. The key to any good con is confidence. Act like you're supposed to be somewhere, and most people will assume you are. The dining room was packed with about 60 people, all of them focused on their Eggs Benedict and morning networking. Richard stood at the front of the room, adjusting his tie and checking his notes one final time. He looked confident, successful, and completely unaware that his world was about to implode. I found an empty chair at a table near the back, nodded politely to the other guests, and waited. At exactly 8:30, the Chamber of Commerce president, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Foster, stood up to introduce Richard. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present this month's Community Leadership Award to Richard Crane, whose company has donated over $50,000 to local schools this year, and whose personal commitment to family values makes him an inspiration to us all." "Richard, way to go!" "Yeah, good up," straightened his shoulders, and walked to the podium with the kind of swagger that comes from years of being told you're important. "Thank you, Margaret," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. "It's an honor to be here with so many distinguished members of our business community." I pulled out my phone and sent Zoe a single word: "Now." Richard continued his speech, talking about corporate responsibility and community involvement, completely unaware that Mike's equipment was already interfacing with the hotel's audio-visual system. The large projection screen behind him was still displaying the Chamber of Commerce logo, but that was about to change. "At Crane Construction, we believe that strong families are the foundation of strong communities," Richard said, gesturing toward the screen behind him. "That's why we're committed to supporting programs that—" The screen flickered, and Richard's voice cut off mid-sentence. For a moment, there was only silence and the confused murmur of 60 business leaders trying to figure out what was happening. Then the audio kicked in. Richard's voice filled the room, but these weren't the words he was speaking at the podium. These were words recorded 3 days ago during a phone conversation with Samantha, a conversation I'd captured using perfectly legal recording equipment, and my wife's tendency to put her phone on speaker when she thought she was alone. "I can't keep doing this, Sam. My wife is getting suspicious, and your husband is making things complicated. Danny doesn't suspect anything. He's too stupid to figure it out." "He's not stupid, and that's the problem. If he finds out about the baby—" "He won't. I'll tell him it's his, and he'll believe it, because he wants to believe it." Was dead silent now. Richard stood frozen at the podium, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and horror as his own voice continued to play through the speakers. "What if he doesn't? What if he demands a paternity test? Then we'll deal with it. You have money and lawyers. He has nothing. I have a reputation to protect, Sam. I can't afford a scandal." "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you started screwing your employee's wife." Belgium under ended, and the room remained silent for another long moment. Then Margaret Foster stood up, her face pale with shock and embarrassment. I think we should adjourn for the morning," she said weakly. But I wasn't finished. I stood up from my table at the back of the room, and every head turned toward me. "Actually, Margaret, I think Richard was just getting to the good part of his speech," I said loudly. "The part about family values and community responsibility. Please, Richard, don't let me interrupt. Tell us more about strong families." Richard's face had gone from pale to red to a sickly gray color. He gripped the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "You son of a witch," he whispered. But the microphone picked it up and broadcast it to the entire room. "That's not very professional language for a community leader," I replied, walking slowly toward the front of the room. "But then again, sleeping with your employees' wives isn't very professional behavior either." The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. Several people were already reaching for their phones, no doubt preparing to share this juicy bit of gossip with their own networks. By noon, the story would be all over social media. By evening, it would be on the local news. Richard stepped away from the podium, his hands shaking with rage. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Sure do. I've told the truth, in front of witnesses, about a man who's been honored for his family values while he destroys other people's families." Margaret Foster was trying to restore order, but it was hopeless. Half the room was staring at Richard like he'd grown a second head, while the other half was staring at me like I was either a hero or a madman. Possibly both. "The recording is fake," Richard said desperately. "It's been doctored. This man is unstable. He's been stalking me and my employees." "The recording is real and you know it," I replied calmly. "But if you think it's fake, I'm sure the police would be happy to have their technical experts examine it, along with the phone records that prove when and where it was made." That shut him up. Richard Crane was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He knew the recording was genuine, and he knew that any technical examination would prove it. I looked around the room at the faces staring back at me. Some shocked, some disgusted, some fascinated by the drama unfolding in front of them. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting your breakfast, but I thought you should know what kind of man you're honoring today. A man who violates the trust of his employees, destroys their marriages, and then tries to destroy their reputations when they fight back." I turned back to Richard, who was still standing behind the podium like a deer caught in headlights. "By the way, Richard, you're going to be a father in about 5 months. Congratulations. I hope you're better at that job than you are at being a boss." I walked out of the dining room and through the hotel lobby, leaving behind the chaos and whispers and shocked silence. In the parking lot, Zoe was waiting by my car, having changed out of her server's uniform and back into her regular clothes. "How did it go?" she asked, though my expression probably told her everything she needed to know. "Better than I hoped," I said, pulling her into my arms and kissing her thoroughly. Richard Crane's reputation just took a hit it won't recover from. Good. He deserved it. From the hotel, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced in months. Richard had used his power and influence to try to destroy my life, but in the end, his own arrogance had been his downfall. The recording would be all over town by evening, and his carefully cultivated image as a family man and community leader was finished. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's letting someone destroy themselves with their own actions, then making sure everyone knows about it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Bradley. "Saw the news alert. Call me when you get a chance. We need to discuss next steps." There would be legal challenges, probably lawsuits, definitely more drama before this was all over. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was winning instead of just surviving. "What now?" Zoe asked. "Now we go home and wait for the fallout and start planning our future." She smiled and put her hand on her growing belly. "Our future sounds pretty good to me." The fall came faster and harder than even I had anticipated. By noon, the video of Richard's humiliation had been uploaded to social media by at least 6 different people who'd been at the breakfast. By 3 o'clock, it had been picked up by the local news stations. By evening, Richard Crane was trending on Twitter, and not in a good way. The recording of his conversation with Samantha had been transcribed and shared thousands of times, along with commentary that ranged from supportive, "This guy deserves justice," to critical, "Two wrongs don't make a right," to downright vicious. Both these men are trash. But the real earthquake came the next morning, when Richard's wife filed for divorce. Margaret Crane was old money, the kind of woman whose family had owned half the county for 3 generations, and who viewed personal scandal as a mortal sin. She'd married Richard when he was an ambitious young contractor with big dreams and bigger charm. And she'd spent 20 years helping him build his reputation in the community. The revelation that he'd been cheating with an employee's wife was more than her pride could tolerate. The divorce filing was just the beginning. Margaret's lawyer also froze all of Richard's business accounts pending a full financial audit, effectively shutting down Crane Construction overnight. Every project stopped, every employee was sent home, and every client started looking for new contractors. I was in Tom Bradley's office when we got the news. "Jesus," Tom said, reading the legal documents on his computer screen. "Margaret's not just divorcing him, she's destroying him. She's claiming half of everything, including the business. Can she do that? In this state, with this much evidence of infidelity? Absolutely. Richard's about to learn that cheating on your wife can be an expensive hobby." My phone rang. The caller ID showed Samantha's number. "You need to fix this," she said without preamble when I answered. "Richard's lost everything. The business is shut down, his wife has frozen his accounts, and nobody will hire him now." "That's not my problem, Sam." "It is your problem. I'm pregnant with his child, and now he can't support us." The irony was so perfect, it was almost beautiful. Samantha had chosen Richard over me because he had money and power. Now he had neither, and she was stuck with the consequences of her choice. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to cheat on your husband with your boss," I said. "Danny, please. I know I made mistakes, but this isn't just about me. It's about the baby. Richard's baby, not mine, not my responsibility." But misinformation, I hung up and turned off my phone. Tom was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know she's right about one thing," he said. "This is going to affect the child. The child has 2 parents who made adult decisions. They can figure out how to deal with the consequences." "That's pretty cold, Danny." "Is it?" Richard Crane tried to share with a lightly competitive this professional. "Is it?" Richard Crane tried to share with a lightly competitive this professional. "That's pretty cold, Danny. Is not just destroy my reputation and my career because I had the audacity to fight back when he stole my wife. Samantha participated in that destruction, spreading lies about me being unstable and predatory. Now they're both facing the consequences of their actions, and suddenly I'm supposed to feel sorry for them?" Tom nodded slowly. "I get it. I do. But what's your endgame here? Richard's finished. Samantha's reputation is in ruins, and you've proven your point. What happens now?" It was a good question. For months, I'd been focused on revenge, on making them pay for what they'd done to me. But revenge, I was learning, was like a pills. The more you got, the more you wanted, until it consumed everything else in your life. "Now I focus on my future instead of their past," I said. That evening, Zoe and I had dinner at a small Italian restaurant on the other side of town, far from the gossip and drama that had consumed our lives for the past month. She was showing more now, nearly 5 months pregnant, and glowing with that inner light that pregnant women get when they're truly happy. "I've been thinking," she said as we shared a plate of garlic bread, "about after the baby comes, about what we want our life to look like." "And what do you want it to look like?" "Quiet, normal, maybe a little boring after all this excitement." I laughed. "Boring sounds pretty good right now. I want to finish college, get my degree in education, maybe teach elementary school. I want us to have a house with a yard where the baby can play. I want Sunday dinners and family vacations and all those ordinary things that make life worth living." "That sounds perfect. What about you? What do you want?" It was a question I'd been asking myself a lot lately. For years, I'd defined myself by my job, my marriage, my place in the social hierarchy of a small town. Now all of that was gone, and I had the opportunity to decide who I wanted to be instead of who I'd been expected to be. I want to build things again, I said. Not just manage projects for other people, but actually create something with my own hands. Maybe start my own contracting business. Focus on residential work instead of commercial. Help people build their dream homes instead of strip malls and office buildings. That sounds like a good dream. It is. And the best part is, we can make it happen. We don't need Richard Crane's approval, or Samantha's permission, or anyone else's blessing. We just need each other, and the willingness to work for what we want. Zoe reached across the table and took my hand. I love you, Danny. Not because you're older or more experienced, or because you rescued me from my family drama. I love you because you're kind and honest, and because you make me feel like I can be anything I want to be. I love you too, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. We were interrupted by my phone, buzzing with a text message. I had turned it back on after dinner, and now I was regretting that decision. The message was from Mike. Turn on channel 7, now. Shielding Zoe showed Zoe the message, and she pulled out her own phone to stream the local news. The lead story was about Richard Crane, but this time, it wasn't about his affair or his divorce. Former construction company CEO Richard Crane was arrested this evening on charges of embezzlement and tax fraud, the anchor reported. According to sources close to the investigation, Crane allegedly diverted more than $200,000 in company funds for personal use, including payments to a private investigator hired to harass a former employee. The story continued with details about Richard's financial crimes, most of which had apparently been uncovered during his wife's divorce proceedings. Margaret's lawyers had found evidence of falsified invoices, unreported income, and a pattern of financial misconduct that went back years. Holy crap, Zoe whispered. The reporter concluded with a statement from the district attorney's office. Mr. Crane is facing multiple felony charges that could result in significant prison time if he's convicted. This investigation is ongoing, and additional charges may be filed. I stared at the phone screen, trying to process what I'd just heard. Richard Crane wasn't just ruined. He was going to prison. The man who'd tried to destroy my life was now facing the complete destruction of his own. Danny? Zoe's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you okay? I think so. I didn't expect this. Are you happy about it? It was a fair question. A month ago, I would have been ecstatic to see Richard Crane arrested and facing prison time. But now, sitting in a quiet restaurant with the woman I loved, and thinking about the future we were building together, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Richard Crane was a man who'd had everything. Money, power, respect, a successful business, a wife who came from one of the most prominent families in the county. He'd thrown it all away for an affair with his employee's wife. And when that affair was exposed, he'd compounded his problems by trying to destroy the employee who dared to fight back. Now, he had nothing. His wife was divorcing him. His business was gone. His reputation was in ruins, and he was facing years in prison. Even if he avoided jail time, he'd never recover from this scandal. No, I said finally. I'm not happy about it. I wanted him to face consequences for what he did. But this is more than consequences. This is complete destruction. He brought it on himself. I know. But that doesn't mean I have to celebrate it. Wireless and relative silence, both of us processing the news and what it meant for our own lives. As we walked to the car, Zoe slipped her arm through mine. So what happens now? She asked. Now we go home. We focus on us, on the baby, on building the life we want. We let Richard and Samantha deal with their own problems while we create something better. Next, no more revenge. No more revenge. No more revenge. I bring it sociate. I might post in 15-point, but rechurch whatsoever. Marchich Cranes with Richard, unless no more revenge. I got what I wanted. The truth came out, and justice was served. Anything more would just be cruelty. As we drove through the quiet streets of our small town, I realized that the war was finally over. Not because I'd won or lost, but because I'd stopped fighting. Richard Crane and Samantha had destroyed themselves with their own choices. and I'd been smart enough to get out of the way and let it happen. Tomorrow, there would be more news stories, more gossip, more fallout from the scandal that had consumed our lives for the past month. But tonight, I was going home with the woman I loved, to plan for the child we were expecting, and the future we were building together. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while your enemies destroy themselves. And sometimes, the sweetest victory is realizing you don't need revenge at all. You just need to be brave enough to build something better from the ashes of what came before. 3 months later, Zoe and I were married in a small ceremony attended by Mike, Tom Bradley, and a handful of friends who'd stuck by us through the chaos. Richard Crane was serving 18 months in minimum security prison. Samantha had moved back in with her mother and was working as a receptionist at a dental office, struggling to make ends meet as a single mother. And I was building houses again, beautiful, custom homes for families who wanted something special, something that would last. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I married Samantha 8 years ago, but it was better than anything I could have imagined back then. On a warm Saturday morning in September, I was putting the finishing touches on a nursery in our new house, a modest 3-bedroom place with a big yard and room to grow, when Zoe called from the kitchen. "Danny, it's time!" I dropped my paintbrush and ran to find her standing by the sink, her face flushed with excitement and pain. "Time for what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Time to meet our daughter." 8 hours later, I held my daughter for the first time. A perfect, beautiful little girl with Zoe's dark hair and my stubborn chin. She was healthy and strong and absolutely perfect. And as I looked down at her tiny face, I realized that this was what winning actually felt like. Not the destruction of your enemies or the satisfaction of revenge, but the creation of something new and precious and full of hope. We named her Grace, because sometimes that's what life gives you when you least expect it. Grace, and the chance to start over, and the wisdom to know the difference between justice and revenge.